China says it has no intention of interfering in the US presidential election in November. Beijing was responding to reports Donald Trump sought China's help with his re-election campaign. The claim has been made in yet another tell-all book from a former Trump official.
Another expose, this time from Donald Trump's former national security advisor. John Bolton claims the president pleaded for Chinese leader Xi Jinping's help to be re-elected during this meeting last year. He says Mr. Trump also hinted that China should buy more agricultural products from the US, a move that would help him during campaign season. Mr. Trump has hit back at the accusations, calling them lies.
Terrible thing that he did, but he broke the law. Very simple. I mean, as much as it's going to be broken, this is highly classified.
Is the president lying?
Yes, he is. And it's not the first time either.
Mr. Trump is also accused of saying he approved of China's controversial detention camps for Uyghur Muslims. Bolton writes that Mr. Trump told President Xi it was, quote, exactly the right thing to do. Yet just as those excerpts were released to US media, Mr. Trump signed a new law calling for Chinese officials to be punished over human rights abuses against Uyghurs, a move China has called a malicious attack on its policy in Xinjiang.
Simon Marks is live in Washington, D.C. He joins us now for more on this. Simon, how will these claims by Mr. Bolton affect already tense and complicated ties between both sides?
Well, it adds a further layer of complexity to the relationship. There's no question about that, Steve, with the book by John Bolton alleging essentially that President Trump invited President Xi Jinping to interfere in America's election by suggesting that he needed the Chinese to buy lots of agricultural product from America's farm states because his own popularity, President Trump's popularity, was dipping in those farm states. This provides new grist for the Democrats' mill, who will say, look, Donald Trump wasn't just inviting interference from Ukraine in America's electoral system. He was also inviting interference from China in America's electoral system. Now, the White House denies that this ever took place, although curiously, John Bolton says that he was unable to provide a direct quote of what President Trump said to President Xi because that was removed from the manuscript during its first security clearance process. We've also seen other figures from within the Trump administration. Bob Lighthizer, the president's trade representative, saying that he was in the meeting and he absolutely has no recollection of President Trump ever saying that. But look, if you're China watching all of this from a distance, you have to be wondering precisely how this is going to impact the outcome of America's presidential election. The Democrats are going to go back on the attack. This is an absolute gift for former Vice President Joe Biden, who will be able to use excerpts from the book in his campaign advertisements and also now excerpts from a television interview that John Bolton has given. And this is a big problem for the White House. ABC News is drip feeding bits of this interview hour by hour over the next several days. Just within the last few minutes, they have aired a section of the interview in which John Bolton says he does not believe that President Trump should be re-elected. He does not view President Trump as being fit for the job. And the difficulty the White House has in all of this is that this is a first-hand account of what happened inside the White House from John Bolton, not a second-hand account, as President Trump used to say, for example, about the whistleblower complaint against him.
So can they do anything? Can the White House do anything? Are they trying to prevent the book from hitting the bookshelves then?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying essentially now to prevent the sale and distribution of the book. The book's been printed, clearly. I mean, all sorts of journalists all over this city and others have got copies of it. So what they're trying essentially to do is to say to the courts, this book contains lots of classified information. It needs to be pulped. It seems highly unlikely at this stage that the courts will go along with this. This book went through an initial classification review by the handlers inside the Trump administration. administration. This book is now in the public domain. The press has clearly written up the central contents of the book. And at that point, I mean, the horse has bolted, the stable door is wide open, the cat is out of the bag. Pick your metaphor. It's far too late at this stage for the White House to prevent this from getting into the hands of the public. And John Bolton has a pretty clear First Amendment argument of free speech on his side. The other problem is that while the White House says this book is filled with classified information, first of all, they haven't proved that. And secondly, it's actually just the embarrassing stuff that may be more damaging to President Trump's reputation. The idea that he didn't know that Britain had its own nuclear weapons capability. He thought Finland was part of Russia. He had the State Department go through hoops for months in a bid to get a CD of Elton John's Rocket Man into the hands of Kim Jong-un. I mean, that stuff's not classified. It's just embarrassing. And that's really the damage that this book has the potential to do to President Trump, even as questions will continue to be asked about John Bolton's motivation, alleging the president engaged in impeachable conduct, not telling Congress about it, but instead using that information to secure himself a $2 million book deal. His conduct in all of this will not be viewed as unimpeachable either.
Okay, May, thanks for that. Simon Mark speaking to us from Washington, D.C.